Welcome to Behind the Book, brought to you by the American Immigration Lawyers Association. This program takes you behind the scenes of AILA's best-selling publications. In this edition of Behind the Book, Anna Gallagher, author of AILA's Focus on Private Bills and Pardons, discusses how her book offers a step-by-step guide to seeking these forms of relief for immigrant clients. When the typical routes taken to represent one's client prove difficult and hopeless, the facts behind a case can often make the difference when deciding to seek a private bill or deferred action. Join us as we go behind the book with Anna Gallagher. Anna Gallagher is a shareholder at Maggio & Cutter in Washington, D.C., where she heads the litigation and global practice areas. She has practiced in the field of immigration and refugee law for more than 2 decades, working in the United States, Central America, and Europe. Anna Gallagher remains active in international refugee and migrant issues and is the president of the International Detention Coalition. How does your book help practitioners and their clients apply for a private bill or a pardon?
I think the book is actually very practical and helpful, and it provides step-by-step instructions on how to apply for a private bill. First, it discusses what it is, talks about the history of private bills, gives examples of private bills that have been passed, and then takes practitioners through the steps that they need to follow in order to apply for and hopefully obtain a private bill.
How difficult is it to obtain a private bill?
It's very difficult. There's only been 2 private bills passed within the last 5 years. There's probably been, I think, the last congressional session, I think that there were 56 introduced, but it's difficult to ascertain the numbers because DHS used to keep the statistics. They no longer do. It's difficult to determine, precisely without significant research how many private bills have been introduced, but at least 56 were introduced. Of those 56, within the last 5 years, only 2 have been passed. So it's very difficult.
We refer to private bills and pardons as Hail Mary defenses. Can you explain why that is?
Okay, well, Hail Mary defense, I'm an Irish Catholic. When things go very badly, you start saying Hail Marys, and you sort of hope for a miracle. And frankly, private bills can be, that's how hard it is to get a private bill. It's almost a miracle. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't apply for them, because having said that there's only been 2 private bills passed in the 5 years, there's success or obtaining the private bill may not be the goal. That would be the optimal goal. But the point is to pressure Congress. If your client already is out in the light, meaning if DHS knows he or she exists, or if they have a final order of removal, it's a way to pressure Congress in compelling cases and to say, you need to help this person. You're talking the talk and saying you want to help immigrants. Well then, walk the walk. It also acts as a stay of removal. So, for example, if they have a stay, it can act if Congress agrees to introduce it and they request a report from DHS, it acts as a stay of removal, and the client can also get work authorization. So it's certainly something people should consider as sort of a last-ditch effort.
Why do some bills pass and some don't?
I think it depends. You have to have your congressional delegation. Well, the representative or the senator that's going to work towards introducing the private bill has to be very much on your side, right? You have to have community support, and a good example of community support would be the Dreamers, right? There's been no private bills passed for them, but there's been plenty of private bills introduced on their behalf. And in fact, Senator Feinstein introduced one for a young student, Stephen Lee, in, I think, December of 2010, who actually didn't know he was undocumented. Had been here since he was 9. His parents sort of wanted to keep him in the dark. They didn't want to worry him. He was going to school, and he was picked up, he was arrested and detained and discovered that he was undocumented. So Senator Feinstein introduced that bill on his behalf. So for the Dreamers, what a lot of them do, they're really an impressive group, and they're a group we can learn from. They'll do media great work on media. They'll do social networking, the whole use of social networks to raise the issues. And so members of Congress, feel somewhat compelled, hopefully, to introduce bills like that. Or at a minimum, if they're not going to introduce a private bill on behalf of students or other people with compelling facts, they'll encourage USCIS or ICE to grant deferred action.
Where should a practitioner begin his or her quest for a private bill?
They have to start, first of all, they have to start with, they want to talk to their member, they have to identify a member of Congress, okay? Generally, you identify a member of Congress in the district where you live, but it's not required. So they identify a member of Congress, they talk to the staff, they get the congressperson on board. Once the congressperson's on board, or they've agreed to move forward with the bill, then the hard work begins. Meaning putting together the application, putting together all the documentation that, to support their claims. We'll use a student, for example, school records, letters from their teachers, letters from their community, religious folks in their community, putting that all together, presenting that to the representative, and having the representative then introduce that bill.
What are the details of some bills that have passed recently?
Well, the two most recent bills that passed, the only two bills that passed in the last 5 years, involved a Japanese woman who was married to a U.S. Marine, a man from Tennessee, and he was killed in the war, and she gave birth to their child after he was killed. So Congress agreed to pass that bill. And then the other private bill, which was recently passed, involved a young Japanese man who was raised by a woman who never formally adopted him, and she was killed. And they agreed to pass a private bill in those circumstances. And I think, clearly the military cases are compelling, and Congress wants to behave well towards military families. It's interesting to me, the young man whose mother didn't adopt him, because that's a case that perhaps there's other cases similar to that. And I would say he had a good strategy. He probably had a good attorney, he had good advocacy, and he knew how to work the private bill.
Do you think private bills and pardons will become more important in the representation of an immigrant client?
I think they'll become more important. It's interesting because we do have, obviously, there's lots of members of Congress that support, in theory, some form of immigration reform, and they want immigrants to like them, and they want to be friendly towards immigrants, but they're not going to take that next step of moving forward with the private bill. I think for a couple reasons. It's a lot of work. Some of them are afraid of political fallout, because if they introduce the private bill, will some of the skeletons come out about the person? However, I think that the advocacy community, or for example, the Dreamers, I would encourage people actually to file large numbers of private bills en masse, make them walk the walk, right? Because they're saying, we're your friend, we like you, we're very sad this is happening. Perhaps we should have a private bill campaign. We should organize with the students. They've already taught us how to organize. They do phenomenal work. And ask them to introduce private bills in large numbers and see what they say. At a minimum, I think that it would stop some of the deportations, and it has.
What led you to write this publication?
Okay, so, over the years, I have some years on me. And I remember when, first of all, clients weren't picked up that much. They weren't deported in the numbers that they're deported as now. The criminal issues were easier and less complicated, and people could have different convictions and not, be deported after living their whole life in the United States. So as we became to be more and more squeezed into a corner, and especially after the 1996 laws, there was less forms of relief available to people. So you have to get creative. And then there was also this talk about private bills, and you would hear people talk about it, but there was never one resource available. There was the Senate rules, very sort of cold and concrete, but who knows, the Senate, operates in different ways. So sure, they have the rules, but there's lots more to it. And the same with the House. I wrote the book, and it deals with private bills, step-by-step instructions, an AILA publication, user-friendly, great for practitioners, busy practitioners. Then it includes information about pardons, because pardons are another form of relief that people should pursue if their client is eligible for it. And then deferred action. So it provides information for people, and it provides some sort of hope for them, because people do win cases. I mean, private bills are hard, but for example, deferred action, lots of people do receive deferred action. So it provides resources to practitioners when it seems like there's no more hope. So I thought it important to sort of put that all down in writing and sort of share a tool with people.
Is this a publication that all practitioners should have?
Oh, absolutely. I really do think that. And it's not because it's not necessarily, you can probably, a handful of practitioners may, present and request a private bill, a small handful, right? But it's something that they should know about, and at least have information to talk to their clients about. Because I have so many clients. One of my firm's expertise is complex cases, right? We often get people, I'm sure like most practitioners, that they're at the end of their road. They're at the end of the road. They want to come in. You have information to explain all options. And if a client does have compelling circumstances and they say they want to move forward with that, then you can represent them and you move forward. Or like, for example, deferred action. I think more and more people know about it, but I'm still surprised because there's still a lot of people that don't understand it because it's a secret, sort of. DHS keeps this as a secret because it's purely discretionary. But it's something that you can use and you can request. So I think it's really important for practitioners to have those books and to say, okay, we have no relief. What next? Let me pull out that little skinny book and look there.